So when we left off last time, Virtual Circuit Riders, we saw Wesley living a successful life as an academic in Oxford, as a teacher of Greek and philosophy, and using his methods of scrupulousness and self-sacrifice to perfect the inner impressions with outer expressions in the Holy Club. And for almost 9 years, Wesley continues this path, which apparently he would have continued on. But a number of choices came his way, as often happens in our own ministerial development. First, his father is about to die close to 1735, and his father, as it says here in the German, asks him, "You should be my successor at Epworth," which was a great honor to be asked to have essentially a tenured clergy appointment. At first, Wesley turns him down and says, "No, Dad, my place is at Oxford." So he returns to Oxford, apparently to think that this was his long-term future, when he is approached by the Board of Trustees of the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, the SPG. The British Empire is expanding, has expanded into the American colonies, and a new colony has been formed in 1733 under General James Oglethorpe, and a new Anglican priest is needed to solidify the work of the crown and of the colony there in Georgia. And so they ask John if he would remain, would he rather remain in Oxford in his successful academic career, or go to the New World and to serve King George II and the church and God there. Well, Wesley, with his mother's upbringing, had always thought about mission, and particularly the Danish Halle missionaries of the Lutheran denomination had captured his attention because his mother read bedtime stories to him of missionary exploits. And so the notion of going to America as a missionary was exciting. The offer was to serve the Crown, the Church of England, and colonial stabilization. Wesley heard it, I get to go and discover a new way to prove that my inner spiritual life has assurance through outer signs and work. The mission to the Native Americans becomes his new search for assurance of his relationship with God. So Samuel was known, his father was known to General Oglethorpe, and so Wesley was given a shot to go in mission. He decides that he would like to recapitulate or repeat the early church experience in mission. He wants his brother Charles to join, which they readily agree. He becomes the secretary of General Oglethorpe, in particular for Native American affairs. And then two other Oxford Holy Club members, Benjamin Ingham and Charles Delamott, who are both ordained Church of England and Oxford Holy Club, quote, Methodists, unquote. They are commissioned to go and represent the work of the church in the new colony. It requires for John one last piece of ratification. What does mother say? Which, you know, is one of those default ideas that John had with a strong mother. And he asked her, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay at Oxford or should I go to the New World as a missionary? Kind of the old Clash song, should I stay or should I go? If I stay, there will be trouble. If I go, there will be double, as the old song said, and that's pretty much what the future lay in store for Wesley. But John's mother said, if I had 10 sons, I'd gladly give them all up for mission, even if I never saw them again. And so John and Charles agree to go to America, and Susanna is pleased. And John always wanted to please his mother. And so, from Lincoln College, as authorized by the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts, which was to supply chaplains to the Crown Colonies, the British Empire expanding in the world, Wesley and company leave for the New World. And they arrive on February 1736 in the New World, and they alight on Cockspur Island, adjacent from modern-day Tybee Island, the luxury resort, and they pray at this spot, and there is a monument there to this day. So, Wesley and company crossed the ocean, but it was not an easy passage. It was a difficult passage, and along the way, a lot of the theological questions that Wesley had came to a head. The storm exposed his own feelings of insecurity, in particular in contrast to the German Moravian brethren, who were German-speaking Protestants who had emerged after hundreds of years of Catholic persecution in the area of the Czech Republic, present-day Czech Republic. And when the storms arose on the Simmons, the boat that they traveled on, they exhibited faith in contrast to Wesley's cowardice. In fact, they began to sing songs, and the psalms and the songs made an impression on John. This one here in German is Unser Leben steht in Gottes Hand. Our lives stand in God's hand. God's hand keeps our future sure, and he immediately understands that his own peace of the soul is weak in contrast to the Moravian brethren, who have no fear of death. And in his writings he said even their children showed no fear. This brought to mind his own search for assurance of faith through outward expressions, and he didn't have anything to claim as a mark of outward assurance, even as these Moravian brethren. And of course, his own motivations for going to Georgia, he wrote in his diary, and were only clarified along the way on the journey. I hope to discover the gospel as I preach it to the Native Americans, and to save my soul. Again, the search for assurance, the scene shifts, but it's still, the song remains the same as the old tune from Led Zeppelin says. The song remains the same. It's a song of theological search, and Wesley continues that along the way. His desire to be in mission to the Native Americans in Savannah is realized. He'd had a meeting with the chief of the Yamacraw people. The Yamacraw people were a subgroup of the Creek Nation, and he had met Tamachachi, the chief, in Great Britain. He had been brought there by the British Foreign Office because the Native Americans in that region were important to co-opt and to ally with as a buffer against the Spanish colonial interest just across the border to the south in Florida. So if, the British needed Tomochichi and his nation as an important buffer. Wesley had learned parts of the Yamakra language and had met him in London, and as they meet in the Savannah Sound there across from Tybee Island, Tomochichi comes out and meets him and gives gifts with his wife, and John learns the reality that his notion that he goes to discover the gospel because he'll just spread it across the Yamakra people, like spreading it across a blank slate. This is a naive notion, and he begins to see that it's more complicated than that. In their first encounter, Wesley begins to see his own inadequacies clearer, which gives rise to a theology of hope, if you will, that God's teaching will include the missionary and the natives. When Wesley arrives and meets Tomochichi, Tomochichi announces, I'm glad that you've arrived, and in England I told you that my people do desire to hear and receive the great word, but don't treat us like the Spanish do. We want to be taught before we are baptized. Wesley, perhaps clarified by his storm experience, responds very moderately. I don't know if it will please God for me to be your teacher, but we will together be taught the word from God above through our interaction. It is a incipient mission theology of the Missio Dei, that God is the missionary and we are but witnesses to it, that shapes our better practices as Wesleyans in world mission today. But the war and the demographic issues facing the Yamakra people and the Creek Nation, caught between the vice of the British expanding empire and the Spanish Empire in Florida, meant that the survival of the Yamakra put them on the road fighting wars, and the politics interfered with John Wesley's hope of a great mission to the Yamakra. So John's work encompassed a parish above 200 miles, and he said a parish of above 200 miles laughs at the labor of one man. The mission field overwhelmed Wesley's ability to work his way into success, his ability to think and work his way to Oxford was shown as and exposed as hollow in the face of the mission, both of the congregations in Savannah, the small parish, and also the work in the emerging St. Simon's Island area, Frederica, where his brother Charles was assigned. So John made 5 trips to preach at St. Simon's along the 65-mile axis, which today runs alongside I-95. And John was ever diligent in his work, preaching among the German Moravians there in Ebenezer, just north of Savannah, to the Scottish immigrants at Fort Argyle, the British immigrants of Savannah and in Frederica, learning multiple languages, working with the Jews, working with the Italians, the Germans, giving